Commander Jake Sullivan pressed his face against the cold metal of the observation window and watched the alien ships approach Earth's biggest space station. The ships looked like giant crystals floating through space, and they sparkled with strange lights that hurt his eyes to look at for too long. He had never seen anything so beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Behind him, Ambassador Lisa Morgan fixed her best diplomatic uniform and checked her appearance in the reflection of a dark screen. Today would change everything for humanity. And she knew it. The Zephyrian Empire had contacted Earth 6 months ago with a message that shocked every person on the planet. They said they came in peace and wanted to help humanity join something they called the Cosmic Prosperity Alliance. They promised to share their advanced technology and protect Earth from dangerous aliens who might want to hurt humans. It sounded too good to be true, but the Earth Council was excited about the possibilities. Dr. Ryan Clark had spent those 6 months learning everything he could about the Zephyrians. He studied their language, which sounded like musical notes mixed with electronic beeps. He watched videos of their society and read their history books that they had shared freely. Everything seemed to show that they were honest and caring beings who really wanted to help younger species grow and prosper. The Zephyrians had skin that could change colors, and they used these colors to show their emotions. When they were happy, their skin glowed with warm golden light, and when they were sad, it turned deep blue. Captain Nina Brooks walked into the observation area and stood next to Jake. She had dark circles under her eyes from staying up late, reading intelligence reports about the aliens. Her team had been trying to intercept Zephyrian communications, but most of their messages were encrypted with technology that Earth computers could not break. The few messages they had decoded worried her greatly. Some Zephyrians seemed to talk about humans the way farmers talked about livestock. They used words that roughly translated to primitive and exploitable. When they thought no one was listening, Nina had tried to warn the Earth Council about her concerns, but they did not want to hear bad news. President Alex Carter and his advisors were too excited about the technology and protection the aliens offered. Earth had been alone in space for so long that the idea of having powerful friends seemed worth any risk. The planet had problems with pollution and overcrowding, and the Zephyrians promised solutions to everything that troubled humanity. The alien delegation arrived at the space station called New Geneva with great ceremony. High Chancellor Vextar led the group, and he was the most impressive Zephyrian anyone had ever seen. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, and his crystalline skin reflected light in patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. When he spoke, his voice was deep and musical, and it made people want to trust him immediately. He brought gifts for the human leaders, including small devices that could heal minor injuries and metal alloys that were stronger than anything Earth science had ever created. The treaty negotiations took 3 days, and the aliens seemed very patient with human questions. They explained that the Cosmic Prosperity Alliance was like a big family where older species helped younger ones learn and grow. They said Earth would keep its government and laws, but would receive guidance from more experienced civilizations. The Zephyrians would build bases on Earth to help protect the planet, and they would share technology slowly so humans could adapt to it properly. Dr. Clark worked day and night to translate the treaty documents from Zephyrian legal language into human terms. The aliens used concepts that did not exist in human law, and some parts of the agreement were very difficult to understand. When he asked for clarification, the Zephyrians would smile and use different words that seemed to mean the same thing, but felt somehow different. They assured him that all the complex language was just normal legal protection that every member of the alliance signed. President Carter arrived at the space station with his top military advisors, Colonel Sam Martinez and General Kate Williams. The president was a man who had always dreamed of the day when humanity would join a galactic community. He had read science fiction books as a child and imagined meeting friendly aliens who would help Earth solve its problems. Now that dream was about to come true, and he could barely contain his excitement. The signing ceremony was planned to be broadcast to every human on Earth and throughout the solar system. Lisa Morgan practiced her speech about this historic moment when humanity would take its first step toward becoming a spacefaring civilization. The Zephyrians prepared their own celebration with lights and music that they said represented joy and friendship in their culture. Nina Brooks made one last attempt to delay the signing. She presented her intelligence findings to the president and his advisors, but they dismissed her concerns as paranoia. Colonel Martinez told her that even if the aliens had some bad intentions, the benefits of the alliance were worth the risks. General Williams agreed that humanity needed powerful friends more than it needed to worry about worst-case scenarios. On the morning of the signing, Jake Sullivan watched High Chancellor Vextar arrive with a dozen other important Zephyrians. They all wore formal robes that shimmered with embedded crystals, and their skin glowed with what they said was excitement about welcoming humans to the galactic community. The alien leader spoke about how rare it was to find a species with as much potential as humanity and how honored the Zephyrians were to be the ones to guide Earth into its bright future. The actual signing took place in a large room with windows that showed the beauty of space and Earth hanging like a blue marble in the distance. President Carter signed first with a pen made from rare metals that the aliens had given him as a gift. Then each member of the Earth Council added their signatures, while cameras recorded every moment for history. The Zephyrians signed last, and their names appeared on the document in flowing script that looked more like art than writing. As the ceremony ended, High Chancellor Vextar raised his arms and his skin began to glow with brilliant patterns of light. All the other Zephyrians joined him, and soon the room was filled with a light show that was both beautiful and overwhelming. They sang something in their musical language that they said was a traditional song of welcome for new alliance members. None of the humans in that room knew. They had just signed away their freedom and independence. Hidden in the complex legal language of the treaty were clauses that made Earth a vassal state of the Zephyrian Empire. The protection they had been promised was actually protection of Zephyrian interests from human resistance. The guidance they would receive was complete control over every aspect of human civilization. The trap had been set perfectly, and humanity had walked into it with smiles on their faces and hope in their hearts. 3 months after the treaty signing, the first Zephyrian trade ships arrived at Earth's major ports, but they did not carry the promised goods and technology. Instead, they brought administrative officials and enforcement squads armed with weapons. That made human military equipment look like toys from a museum. Admiral John Hayes stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching alien vessels take positions around Earth's orbital defenses, and he felt a cold fear growing in his stomach. The Zephyrians had sent a message to all human military commanders ordering them to stand down immediately and submit to what they called administrative oversight. Any resistance would be considered a violation of the treaty and would result in severe consequences for the entire human race. Admiral Hayes had spent 30 years in the Earth Defense Fleet, and he had never felt so helpless as he did watching alien ships position themselves to control every major shipping lane and communication satellite. Dr. Sarah Palmer was working late in her laboratory on Luna research facility when Zephyrian technicians arrived unannounced and began dismantling her quantum computer array. When she protested, they showed her a document that authorized them to confiscate any human technology that violated galactic safety standards. According to their rules, almost everything humans had invented was too dangerous for a primitive species to operate. Without proper supervision from more advanced civilizations, the aliens worked with cold efficiency as they packed away years of human scientific progress into storage containers marked with Zephyrian symbols. Dr. Palmer watched them take apart a fusion reactor that had taken her team 5 years to design and build. When she asked when the equipment would be returned, they told her that was not her concern anymore. All human scientific research would now be conducted under Zephyrian guidance and approval. On Earth, Commissioner Elena Rodriguez found herself powerless as alien administrators took control of major cities around the globe. They established what they called guidance centers in every capital where humans were processed and assigned new roles in the Galactic Empire. The processing involved medical examinations and psychological testing that determined which humans were suitable for different types of work. Traditional human governments were dissolved overnight and replaced by alien-appointed regional managers, who reported directly to Zephyrian supervisors. President Carter and his cabinet were moved to a secure facility where they would serve as ceremonial figureheads, while real decisions were made by their alien overseers. The president tried to protest but was told that resistance to the new order would result in his replacement by someone more cooperative. The true nature of Zephyrian intentions became clear during a galaxy-wide broadcast by High Chancellor Vextar. He stood in what had once been the United Nations building and explained that humans were now classified as a Class 7 developing species under the protection and guidance of the Zephyrian Empire. This classification meant that humans were considered intellectual property of the Empire and would be relocated to designated work colonies where they could contribute to galactic prosperity. The Chancellor explained that Earth's population would be reduced to a more manageable size through relocation programs. Most humans would be sent to mining colonies on distant worlds where they would extract rare elements needed for Zephyrian technology. Earth itself would be converted into an agricultural world to feed the Empire's growing population. Human children would be taken from their families and educated in special facilities where they would learn to be productive citizens of the galactic community. Captain Nina Brooks had seen enough. She gathered the few military officers who had not yet been arrested by Zephyrian security forces and began organizing a resistance movement. They met in secret locations and used old-fashioned paper messages to avoid alien surveillance systems. Nina discovered that the treaty had been written in a way that made every human signature an act of consent to slavery and exploitation. The protection clause that had sounded so appealing actually meant protection of Zephyrian interests from human rebellion. The trade agreements were really work quotas that humans would be forced to meet in the labor colonies. The technology sharing promises were lies designed to make humans cooperate until it was too late to resist. Every benefit mentioned in the treaty was actually a method of control disguised with pleasant-sounding words. Nina's intelligence network uncovered the full scope of the Zephyrian operation. Transport ships were already being prepared to move millions of humans to work camps on dozens of different worlds. Earth's oceans would be drained to provide water for Zephyrian agricultural projects. The planet's forests would be cleared to make room for alien settlements and industrial facilities. Dr. Palmer managed to escape from Luna before the Zephyrians could arrest her. She joined Nina's resistance and shared intelligence about alien technology and weaknesses she had observed during her captivity. The Zephyrians were not as invincible as they appeared. Their crystalline exoskeletons were vulnerable to certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, and their technology had built-in limitations that could be exploited by someone who understood their design principles. Admiral Hayes received secret communications from resistance cells throughout the solar system. Despite official orders to surrender, many military personnel had gone underground and were waiting for orders to fight back. Hidden weapons caches and supply depots that had been established during the Cold War were being activated by personnel who had never forgotten their oath to defend humanity against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The Zephyrians began implementing their relocation program, starting with the most populated cities on Earth. Massive transport ships landed in major metropolitan areas, and alien soldiers began loading human families into cargo holds like livestock. Anyone who resisted was stunned with energy weapons and dragged aboard unconscious. Children were separated from their parents and loaded onto different ships to prevent family groups from staying together and possibly organizing resistance. Commissioner Rodriguez was forced to sign deportation orders for millions of her own people. The aliens told her that cooperation would result in better treatment for the humans under her authority, but resistance would mean death for everyone in her jurisdiction. She signed the papers with tears in her eyes, knowing that she was sending innocent people to lives of slavery and suffering. The processing centers became scenes of horror as humans were sorted according to their usefulness to the Empire. Strong young people were marked for heavy labor in the mines. Intelligent individuals were selected for technical work maintaining alien equipment. Children were designated for education programs that would turn them into loyal servants of the Empire. The elderly and disabled were classified as non-essential. and loaded onto ships bound for worlds, where they would not survive long enough to consume resources. High Chancellor Vexstar announced that the relocation program was proceeding ahead of schedule thanks to human cooperation. He praised the wisdom of human leaders who had chosen to work with the Empire rather than futilely resist the inevitable. In 6 months, Earth's population would be reduced to the optimal level for agricultural production, and the planet would begin its new role as a food supplier for the galactic community. What the Zephyrians did not know was that their perfect trap was about to become their downfall. Hidden throughout the solar system, human military forces were preparing for a coordinated response that would catch the aliens completely by surprise. The resistance had been growing stronger every day as more people learned the truth about their situation. Captain Brooks and her allies had discovered that humanity was not as helpless as their enemies believed. The countdown to liberation had begun, and soon the Zephyrians would learn that enslaving humanity was the biggest mistake they had ever made. The Zephyrians had made a critical error in their assessment of humanity. They had studied human technology and military capabilities, but they had failed to understand the most important aspect of human nature, which was the ability to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. What they thought was complete surrender was actually the beginning of the most carefully planned counterattack in galactic history. Colonel Sam Martinez emerged from a supposedly abandoned military bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains and activated communication systems that the aliens did not even know existed. For decades, Earth's military had maintained secret installations throughout the solar system as insurance against exactly this type of scenario. Operation Deep Cover had been planned by paranoid generals who believed that first contact with aliens would more likely result in invasion than friendship. Commander Jake Sullivan had been coordinating with these hidden bases while publicly appearing to comply with Zephyrian demands. Every day he filed reports with alien administrators about human military assets being decommissioned and destroyed, but in reality, the weapons and equipment were being moved to concealed facilities where they could be maintained and upgraded in secret. The Zephyrians thought they had neutralized Earth's defenses, but they had only eliminated the obvious targets. Dr. Ryan Clark's xenobiology research had yielded far more than cultural understanding during the months before the treaty signing. His team had been secretly collecting biological samples from Zephyrian visitors and conducting experiments that would have horrified the aliens if they had known about them. The research revealed that Zephyrian physiology had several critical weaknesses that human technology could exploit with devastating effectiveness. The crystalline exoskeletons that made Zephyrians nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons were actually their greatest vulnerability. The crystal structure resonated at specific electromagnetic frequencies, and when exposed to those frequencies, it would shatter like glass hit with a hammer. Dr. Clark had developed portable devices that could generate the exact frequency needed to turn a Zephyrian warrior into a pile of broken crystal fragments in seconds. General Kate Williams commanded a facility that officially did not exist according to all Earth military records. Deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain, a team of scientists and engineers had been reverse engineering alien technology for years using wreckage from crashed ships that had visited Earth long before official first contact. The technology they had developed matched and in some cases exceeded Zephyrian capabilities. The humans had built cloaked spacecraft using principles learned from captured alien vessels. They had developed energy weapons that could punch through Zephyrian shields and armor. Most importantly, they had created defensive systems that could protect human installations from the devastating orbital bombardments that the aliens used to pacify rebellious worlds. The Zephyrians believed they held all the technological advantages, but humanity had been quietly closing that gap for decades. Agent Patricia Stone had been working undercover in the Zephyrian administration since the first week of the occupation. She posed as a cooperative human translator, but she was actually feeding false information to the aliens while gathering intelligence about their plans and weaknesses. Her reports revealed that the Zephyrian Empire was not the unstoppable force it appeared to be from the outside. The Empire was actually a fragile confederation held together by fear and propaganda. Many of the species under Zephyrian control were only cooperating because they believed resistance was impossible. If they saw evidence that the Zephyrians could be defeated, they would likely join any rebellion against their oppressors. Patricia had made contact with resistance groups on several worlds and found them eager to coordinate their efforts with any human uprising. Dr. Sarah Palmer had escaped to a hidden lunar facility where she and her team had working on faster than light communication technology. The project was years ahead of anything the Zephyrians possessed, and it allowed the resistance to coordinate activities across the entire solar system without detection. Messages that would take hours to reach their destination, using conventional technology, could now be transmitted instantaneously. The communication breakthrough meant that human forces scattered throughout the solar system could act as a single coordinated unit instead of isolated groups. Commander Greg Foster on Mars Colony reported that his people had been stockpiling weapons and supplies in preparation for this moment. The asteroid mining stations had been converted into heavily armed fortresses. Even the research stations on the outer planets had been quietly militarized. Captain Nina Brooks used the new communication system to coordinate with resistance cells on Earth and throughout human space. She discovered that the network of hidden military installations was far more extensive than even she had imagined. There were secret bases inside hollowed-out asteroids and camouflage facilities on the dark side of the moon. Underground complexes beneath major cities had been stocked with enough weapons and supplies to support a long guerrilla war. The human resistance had also been studying Zephyrian tactics and strategy, using intelligence gathered by agents like Patricia Stone. The aliens relied heavily on their technological superiority and their reputation for invincibility. They were not prepared for an enemy that could match their technology and was willing to use unconventional tactics that civilized species would consider barbaric. Admiral John Hayes had been secretly rebuilding the Earth defense fleet using hidden shipyards that the Zephyrians had never discovered. The new ships were built using a combination of human engineering and captured alien technology. They were smaller and faster than traditional human vessels, but they packed enough firepower to engage Zephyrian warships on equal terms. More importantly, they were crewed by personnel who had been training for this moment their entire careers. The resistance had also been working to undermine Zephyrian operations from within. Human workers in the processing centers were secretly sabotaging alien equipment and gathering intelligence about deportation schedules. Transport ship crews were being bribed or threatened into cooperating with escape plans. Even some of the regional managers appointed by the aliens were actually resistance sympathizers who were feeding information to the underground. Dr. Clark's biological weapons research had produced more than just the electromagnetic frequency generators. His team had developed airborne agents that would cause Zephyrian crystalline skin to become brittle and crack. They had created neural disruptors that would interfere with alien brain chemistry and cause confusion and disorientation. Most devastating of all, they had engineered a virus that would attack the symbiotic organisms that lived inside Zephyrian bodies and were essential for their survival. The weapons were designed to be deployed through the water supplies and air conditioning systems of facilities where Zephyrians were concentrated. Within hours of release, the aliens would begin experiencing symptoms that would render them incapable of effective resistance. The biological agents were specifically tailored to Zephyrian physiology and would be harmless to humans and most other species. General Williams revealed that the hidden military complex had been monitoring all Zephyrian communications since the beginning of the occupation. They had broken most of the alien encryption codes and were reading enemy plans almost as soon as they were made. This intelligence advantage would allow human forces to anticipate Zephyrian responses and stay one step ahead of their reactions. The resistance had discovered that the aliens were planning a massive celebration to mark the completion of the first phase of their occupation of Earth. High Chancellor Vexstar would broadcast to the entire galaxy, showing the successful subjugation of humanity as an example to other species who might consider resistance. The celebration would bring together the entire Zephyrian leadership in one location where they would be vulnerable to a coordinated attack. Captain Brooks realized that this celebration presented the perfect opportunity to strike back. If the Resistance could capture or eliminate the Zephyrian leadership during their moment of triumph, it would send shockwaves throughout their empire and inspire rebellions on dozens of worlds. The trap that had been set for humanity was about to be turned against their oppressors. The countdown to liberation had reached its final phase, and soon the galaxy would learn that humanity was far from the helpless primitive species the Zephyrians had assumed they were conquering. The Zephyrian celebration was scheduled to begin at exactly noon Earth time with a galaxy-wide broadcast, showing the peaceful and orderly transition of humanity into productive members of the galactic community. High Chancellor Vexstar had invited representatives from dozens of alien species to witness this historic moment, when the last free world in this sector of space officially became part of the Empire. What none of them expected was that this moment of triumph would become their greatest defeat. Captain Nina Brooks crouched in the maintenance tunnels beneath the former United Nations building where the celebration was taking place. Her strike team consisted of 20 carefully selected soldiers who had been training for this moment for months. Each member carried Dr. Clark's electromagnetic frequency weapons, along with conventional firearms loaded with ammunition designed to penetrate Zephyrian armor. They had memorized the layout of the building and practiced their assault until they could execute it perfectly in complete darkness. Above them, High Chancellor Vexstar was delivering a speech about the wisdom of human leaders who had chosen cooperation over futile resistance. He gestured toward the human officials who sat in chairs designed to look like thrones but were actually restraint devices that would prevent any attempt at disruption. President Carter and his cabinet looked like prisoners trying to maintain dignity while their captors celebrated their defeat. At exactly noon, Admiral John Hayes gave the signal that began Operation Freedom Strike. Throughout the solar system, hidden human military installations came online simultaneously and began broadcasting on frequencies that jammed all Zephyrian communications. The aliens suddenly found themselves cut off from their command structure and unable to coordinate their response to what was about to happen. The first targets were the Zephyrian ships in orbit around Earth. Admiral Hayes led a squadron of cloaked human vessels that had been waiting in the asteroid belt for this moment. The new ships were faster and more maneuverable than anything in the Zephyrian fleet, and they struck without warning using weapons that the aliens had never encountered before. Within minutes, 3 of the largest enemy vessels were disabled and drifting helplessly in space. On the surface, Captain Brooks and her team emerged from the tunnels and began their assault on the celebration venue. The electromagnetic frequency weapons proved devastatingly effective against the Zephyrian guards, whose crystalline exoskeletons shattered like glass when exposed to the precise frequencies that Dr. Clark had discovered. The aliens had no defense against a weapon that turned their greatest strength into their most critical weakness. The strike team moved through the building with deadly precision, eliminating alien security forces and liberating human prisoners. Each Zephyrian they encountered collapsed as their protective armor cracked and fell away, leaving them vulnerable to conventional weapons. The aliens had never faced an enemy that could neutralize their technological advantages so completely, and they panicked when they realized their supposed invincibility was an illusion. Lieutenant Commander Tony Russell led a boarding party that captured the Zephyrian flagship after Admiral Hayes had disabled its engines and weapon systems. The alien crew surrendered quickly when they saw their comrades being cut down by weapons they could not defend against. Russell's team seized control of the ship's communication array and began broadcasting the truth about the Zephyrian Empire to every world within range of their transmitters. Dr. Sarah Palmer's team had prepared a comprehensive information package that revealed the Empire's history of deception and exploitation. The broadcast included testimony from resistance fighters on dozens of worlds, along with evidence of Zephyrian war crimes and atrocities. Species that had been told they were protected members of a benevolent alliance learned that they were actually slaves in a vast system of oppression and exploitation. On Mars, Commander Greg Foster launched simultaneous attacks on Zephyrian research stations and administrative centers throughout the outer system. His forces had been augmented with volunteers from the asteroid mining colonies who brought their industrial equipment to use as weapons. Heavy mining lasers designed to cut through solid rock proved highly effective at destroying alien installations and equipment. The Zephyrians had established a major research facility on Mars, where they conducted experiments on captured humans. To better understand their new slaves, Commander Foster's assault team liberated hundreds of prisoners who had been subjected to medical procedures that violated every principle of civilized behavior. The evidence of these atrocities was immediately transmitted to the Resistance communication network for broadcast throughout the galaxy. Back on Earth, Minya Brooks fought her way through the celebration venue toward the main stage where High Chancellor Vexstar was still trying to maintain his composure despite the chaos erupting around him. The alien leader had called for reinforcements, but his communication systems were jammed, and his guards were falling to weapons that seemed to come from nowhere. For the first time in his life, the Chancellor was experiencing the fear that his victims had felt for centuries. General Kate Williams commanded the defense of Earth's major cities as Zephyrian reinforcements attempted to land and restore order. Her hidden missile batteries emerged from camouflaged positions and began targeting alien transport ships before they could deploy their troops. The electromagnetic pulse weapons that had been developed in secret proved capable of disabling entire squadrons of enemy aircraft with single shots. The biological weapons that D.R. Clark had developed were deployed through the water supplies of facilities where Zephyrians were concentrated. Within hours, alien personnel began experiencing symptoms that rendered them incapable of effective resistance. Their crystalline skin became brittle and began cracking while their symbiotic organisms died, causing severe internal damage. The aliens had no medical countermeasures for weapons designed specifically to target their unique physiology. Agent Patricia Stone revealed her true identity to the Zephyrian administrators she had been serving and began coordinating with resistance cells throughout the occupied territories. Her intelligence network provided real-time information about enemy troop movements and supply lines, allowing human forces to stay one step ahead of their opponents. The aliens discovered that their human servants had been spying on them and sabotaging their operations from the very beginning. The speed and coordination of the human counterattack shocked the Zephyrian Empire. They had conquered dozens of worlds over the centuries, but they had never faced resistance like this. Their standard tactics of overwhelming technological superiority and brutal retaliation were useless against an enemy that had prepared for their arrival and developed specific countermeasures for their weapons and defenses. Captain Brooks finally reached High Chancellor Vexstar, who was cowering behind an overturned table as his bodyguards fell around him. The alien leader tried to negotiate, offering to withdraw from Earth in exchange for his life, but Brooks had seen too much suffering to accept any deal with the creatures responsible for enslaving her species. She activated her electromagnetic weapon and watched as the Chancellor's protective exoskeleton cracked and shattered. Within 72 hours, the entire Zephyrian occupation force had been either captured or destroyed. The alien empire that had seemed invincible just days before was suddenly facing rebellions on dozens of worlds as species that had been oppressed for generations saw evidence that their oppressors could be defeated. The galaxy-wide broadcast of human victory inspired resistance movements throughout known space. Admiral Hayes reported that the Zephyrian home fleet was retreating toward their core worlds after suffering devastating losses in engagements throughout the outer systems. The aliens had expected easy victory over a primitive species, but instead found themselves fighting for survival against an enemy that had turned their own advantages against them. The hunters had become the hunted, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The celebration that was supposed to mark humanity's final defeat had instead become the beginning of the end for the Zephyrian Empire and the birth of a new era of freedom for oppressed species throughout the galaxy. The news of humanity's victory over the Zephyrian Empire spread through the galaxy faster than anyone had thought possible. Species that had been enslaved for generations suddenly found themselves looking at their oppressors with new eyes and seeing weakness where they had once seen invincible strength. Within weeks of the human counterattack, rebellions erupted on dozens of worlds as alien populations realized that freedom was possible if they had the courage to fight for it. Ambassador Lisa Morgan found herself in a position she had never imagined. When she first signed the treaty that was supposed to make humanity part of the galactic community, instead of representing a junior member begging for acceptance, she was now speaking for the most feared military force in known space. Representatives from former Zephyrian colonies arrived at Earth daily seeking alliance with the species that had accomplished what they had thought impossible. The liberation of the galaxy had not been accomplished without cost. Thousands of human soldiers had died in the fighting, and entire cities on several worlds had been destroyed by Zephyrian retaliation strikes before the Empire collapsed. But the sacrifice had been worthwhile because it had broken the chains that had bound countless billions of intelligent beings to lives of slavery and exploitation under alien rule. President Alex Carter was restored to his rightful position as leader of Earth, but he found that his world was no longer the isolated planet it had been before first contact. Humanity was now at the center of a growing coalition of free worlds that looked to Earth for leadership and protection. The responsibility was enormous, but so was the opportunity to build something better than what had existed before. Captain Nina Brooks was appointed as the first military commander of what became known as the Free Worlds Coalition. Her experience fighting the Zephyrians and her understanding of their tactics made her the obvious choice to lead the defense of newly liberated worlds against any attempt by the Empire to regain control. She established training programs to teach other species the techniques that had proven so effective against apparently superior alien technology. Dr. Ryan Clark became the Coalition's chief medical officer and began developing treatments to help species that had been damaged by years of Zephyrian experimentation and exploitation. His research into alien biology had saved humanity during the war, and now it was being used to heal the wounds that the Empire had inflicted on its victims. Medical centers throughout the galaxy began using human-developed treatments to restore health and hope to populations that had suffered for generations. The captured Zephyrian technology was distributed freely among Coalition members instead of being hoarded by Earth, as some had suggested. Human scientists worked with their alien counterparts to understand and improve the devices and systems that had once been used to oppress them. The combination of human innovation and alien knowledge accelerated technological development throughout the Coalition at an unprecedented rate. Dr. Sarah Palmer led a team of scientists from dozens of different species in perfecting faster-than-light travel and communication systems. The breakthrough allowed Coalition worlds to maintain contact and coordinate their defenses even when separated by vast distances. More importantly, it enabled rapid response to any threats that might emerge from the remnants of the Zephyrian Empire or other hostile powers. Commander Greg Foster was placed in charge of establishing new colonies on worlds that had been abandoned when their populations were relocated to Zephyrian labor camps. Many of these worlds had been stripped of resources or contaminated by industrial accidents, but human engineering and alien knowledge working together could restore them to habitability. The galaxy had room for everyone if they were willing to work together instead of exploiting each other. High Chancellor Vextar and the other captured Zephyrian leaders were put on trial for crimes against multiple species. The proceedings were broadcast throughout the galaxy and served as both a warning to other would-be conquerors and a symbol of justice for the Empire's victims. The evidence presented during the trials revealed the full scope of Zephyrian atrocities and helped explain why so many species had been willing to fight for their freedom. The trial also revealed information about other hostile powers in distant regions of the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire had been just one of several aggressive civilizations that viewed younger species as resources to be exploited rather than equals to be respected. The Free Worlds Coalition would need to remain strong and vigilant to protect its members from these other threats. Agent Patricia Stone was appointed as the Coalition's intelligence chief and began establishing networks throughout the galaxy to monitor potential threats and gather information about hostile activities. Her experience working undercover among the Zephyrians had taught her valuable lessons about the importance of good intelligence in preventing future conflicts. The coalition would never again be caught unprepared by enemies who disguised their true intentions. Admiral John Hayes commanded the coalition fleet that patrolled the border regions where Zephyrian remnants still posed a threat to liberated worlds. His ships were equipped with the latest human and alien technology and crewed by volunteers from dozens of different species who had united in their determination to prevent any return to the old system of oppression and exploitation. The economic benefits of freedom quickly became apparent as trade flourished between coalition worlds. Species that had been forced to ship their resources to Zephyrian core worlds could now trade freely with each other and develop their economies according to their own needs and priorities. Prosperity increased dramatically throughout the coalition as worlds that had been impoverished under alien rule began to rebuild and grow. General Kate Williams established military academies on key worlds throughout the coalition where officers from different species could learn to work together effectively. The curriculum included not only military tactics and strategy, but also courses on the history of oppression and the importance of protecting freedom for all intelligent beings. The goal was to create a new generation of leaders who would never allow another empire like the Zephyrians to arise. The coalition government was designed to prevent any single species from dominating the others as the Zephyrians had done. Each member world had representation proportional to its population, but important decisions required consensus among multiple species. Humanity's role was more that of coordinator and protector than ruler, and the system seemed to be working well, despite occasional disagreements. Lieutenant Commander Tony Russell led exploration missions to regions of the galaxy that had been forbidden under Zephyrian rule. These expeditions discovered dozens of worlds that had been hiding their civilizations to avoid being absorbed into the Empire. Many of these hidden species were eager to join the coalition once they learned that it was possible to be part of a galactic community without surrendering their independence. 5 years after the liberation, the galaxy was a very different place than it had been under Zephyrian rule. Trade and communication flourished between worlds that had been isolated from each other for centuries. Scientific cooperation led to advances that no single species could have achieved alone. Most importantly, the concept of freedom had spread to regions that had never known anything but oppression and exploitation. Commander Jake Sullivan stood once again at an observation window, but this time he was watching human ships departing for exploration missions throughout the galaxy instead of alien vessels approaching to enslave his species. The trap that had been designed to destroy humanity had instead freed an entire galaxy and proved that even the most advanced civilization could be defeated by beings who refused to surrender their freedom. The galaxy had learned that technology and military power meant nothing without the will to use them in defense of principles worth dying for, and that sometimes the greatest victories came from turning an enemy's strengths against them when the moment was right.